Hi, I'm Vicki Lowe. Welcome to your Senior Center. Today we're going to be doing cake decorating. This is a class that Deb Sheward and I have done a couple of times at the Senior Center, only we've decorated cupcakes. So today we want to show you how to do a few different flowers, and we're going to decorate a wreath cake. So Deborah Sheward is also the one of the bakers and decorators at Stop and Shop in Foxborough. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, so we're going to do a wreath cake with a variety of flowers around the top of the cake. We're going to do a double layer cake. We'll show you how to frost in that. So I'm going to do a couple of roses for you and then a couple of rosebuds, which are the easiest flower you can do. So we'll start off with a rose.
And I'll grab my glasses.
Okay, when you make flowers, you can buy tips, which look like this, and you put them on a pastry bag that's filled with a little bit of frosting. This rose tip looks like a skinny little triangle, and when you make the rose, we're going to make our flowers on a square of parchment paper so that we can take them on the paper and freeze them so they'll be really easy for us to handle when we make our flower wreath. So I'm going to put a little bit of parchment paper on this flower nail, which is what you make a rose on. So I'm going to stick that parchment paper onto the flower nail with a little bit of frosting. Then to make a rose, you use this rose tip, which I said is made like a skinny little triangle, and you start with the skinny edge of the triangle pointed up. The first thing I do is I'm going to make a little round, little mound of frosting. Then to make the tip of the rose, just go around and you make like the top of a little rosebud. And then you make the petals. I start out with making 3 petals. That look like that. And then you just work your way around the rose to make the rose as large as you want by making 3 more petals. And then I finish it off by making a circle around the base of the rose. And then I'm going to take that flower on the parchment paper, and we're going to pop those in the freezer so they get nice and stiff so that we can work with them more easily. So what do you think, Vicki? A couple of pink roses and a couple of yellow roses?
Yeah, and maybe we could hold it like this and Paul could get a close-up of what you're doing.
Okay, so I've made the little mound of frosting and made a little circle around the top like the tip of a rosebud. And then I'm going to make 1 petal, a 2nd petal, and a 3rd petal. Then going around a 2nd time, 1 petal, a 2nd petal, a 3rd petal, we're going to keep this kind of a small rose, just 1 more set of petals around the rose. 1, 2, 3. and then finish it off with a circle around the base. Oops.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? When it freezes, we can peel it off.
Okay. Actually, while we're using the pink, we'll do a couple of pink rosebuds, which are really easy. For a rosebud, we're going to squeeze our frosting a little closer into the tip. And then to make it easier to handle, we twist off the bag so that you don't have to squeeze very hard with your hand. The frosting is just kind of forced out by twisting the bag. So for a rosebud, once again, I'm going to grab a paper towel. Thank you, Vicki. Clean off the tip so I can see what I'm doing here. Make sure that the skinny end of your triangle is on the top. And for a rosebud, just go 1, 2, 3. I'll make a smaller one now. And now we'll switch to yellow.
I'll grab your tip.
Okay.
This one's maybe a little bit smaller.
Okay. So the rose tips come in all sizes, so you can make little roses, big roses, great big cabbage roses. So this one is a little bit smaller. And again, we're going to make sure that the skinny end of the triangle, which forms the rose tip, is on the top. Thank you. And we're going to start out with a little mound of frosting. With a little circle to form the tip of the rosebud. Oops. And then 1 petal, 2 petals, 3 petals. One, 2, 3.
Very pretty.
Okay.
Is that tip too small?
I think I should have just made a smaller mound. Because of the size of the tip, I'm going to make a smaller mound of frosting this time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe the other tip looks a little gunky.
Okay. So because this tip is a little bit smaller than the one we used for our pink rose, we're going to make our mound a little lower. The tip of our rosebud, and then 1 petal, 2 petals, 3 petals, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. and finish it off by circling the base of the rose. So you just have a little rose there. And we'll finish it up by making a couple of little yellow rosebuds. Whoops. One, two, three. Just a little oval, second, third. Okay. So there you have it. That's the basic rose and the basic rosebud. But we're going to have a variety of flowers in our wreath, and Vicky's going to show you some flowers now.
Okay, I thought that one of the flowers that I would show you is how to make a daisy. I just wanted to add a little more frosting to this bag. So there's several ways to make a daisy, but my favorite way is to use it's a Wilton leaf tip. And this is a number 67 leaf tip. So I start out, well actually, the first thing I do is I put a little mound. You always need a little mound in the center for the flower. So first I'll put a little mound on. And these bags, we already put the coupler in, but the thing about the coupler, it's got a little screw top, and you can just change tops so that you can use the same color without having to use more bags of frosting. I put a little frosting here to hold my paper down. And put a little mound for the center of the flower, which I'll change colors on, but I need to have something in the center so I know where the petals are coming out from. And then I'll just change to the number 67 tip, which is a very small leaf tip, and this is what it looks like. The flower nail also has a little screw bottom so that it makes it easier to twirl it when you're trying to do the flowers. So with this, you also keep, with the leaf tip, if you think of it as a bird's mouth, you're doing it so that the points are this way and it's opened on the other side. So if you think of it as like a beak. So I'm just going to squeeze and make one petal, make a few petals across the bottom of my center. So that doesn't look like much, so we have to then just keep building layers on top of that, the way a little daisy looks. Oops. I'm not going to use that one. And you just go a few layers up. And then I'm going to take my yellow frosting and there's a tip that is called, it's like a grass clip. Up. and it's like a flat top and it has little holes in it. So since daisies kind of have that kind of center where there's all those little dots of color, I'm going to put that just right in the center of the flower. So there's a daisy. So I'll make a couple of those. Actually, maybe I'll try to just do it without changing tips. And then, so I just put my petals all the way around and just turn the nail as you go. Nice even pressure. And they don't have to look perfect because they're not in nature, so perfectly symmetrical. As long as we get that kind of star shape. Well, and then I'll put this in the center. So we'll do a couple of those off camera, but the next flower I thought I'd show you is how to do little blossom flowers. So for that, I'm going to use the same petal tip. This is a Wilton 102. 102 is the smaller size, so they're 102, 104, 105, and that's how the size goes up. But I'm going to use the same tip that we used for the rose, except that I'm going to just hold it a little differently, and that'll help. That's how I'll make it shape. It's different when there's not people here asking questions.
I know, it's very different.
Can you hold that for 1 second?
Sure.
The other thing I try to do with my bag so that it doesn't squirt out on my hand is just kind of wrap it around my thumb so I get a good hold on it and I can squeeze well. So that's what I was trying to do. All right, so for this, you kind of always have the wide end of this tip on the bottom. So you just hold it and make a loop. Hold it and make a loop. So there's one layer, and then I'll just put one more layer of petals on the top to give our flower a little more depth. And then, like I did with the daisy, just put a couple of little dots in the center. So I'll do it one more time so you can see. And the other thing with the rose, you're holding it this way, and this one you're kind of holding it everything down. So you're just going down to make the loops. And I make 5 petals on the bottom and then maybe 3 on the top, something like that. So we're gonna go off camera for a minute, make a few more flowers, and then we're going to show you how we're going to frost the cake and get it set up to be able to make it. So we're going to end up having about 5 of each kind of flowers for our wreath, and we'll put those in the freezer so that they are easy to handle while we are setting up the cake. All right, so now we're going to frost the cake. And when I first got into cake decorating, it was because I went to a class at Michael's with a Wilton instructor. So I'm not advocating Wilton over something else, but those are the things that I bought. So one of the tools that they showed us about is a cake leveler. So it's a tool that you can use. So if you get a big mound on your cake, you can just run this across here. This is nice and flat, so we're not going to do it. You can just run it across, and this tool is,
again, please.
you can just run this right across the top, and it'll cut off that mound if you have one on your cake. And the other way to do it is you can use a serrated knife, but this is such a nice tool because it's got these little feet, and you can just go straight across, and it doesn't, it's nice and even. Another tip that I learned from watching YouTube videos about cooking is when you have to level cakes, you lose a lot of the cake with this big mound that you get sometimes. So this is just an old 9-inch cake pan, but I found these things. They're called even bake cake strips, and it's just a strip of fabric that has Velcro on it, and you just attach it. But you soak it in water for 15 minutes ahead of time so that it's really saturated. Wring it out so that you just want it to be wet, and you wrap it around, and when the cake comes out, it's much more level than when you don't have this. The cake must get hotter on the sides so that it mounds up. When you have these strips on that are soaked in water and so they're cooler, it just adjusts the temperature so that you get a nice flat top, kind of like this cake is. So that was just one of those tips I heard about, and it's such an easy thing. It's, you know, just fabric on one side, silver on the other with Velcro. And you can adjust it. I've used it on a 6-inch pan. I've used it on an 8-inch pan. This is a 9-inch pan. So 9 is about the maximum that you can get. So now you're going to frost.
Yeah, and one other tip about the cake leveler is that I've used the cake leveler to turn a double layer cake into a 4-layer cake. You can adjust it so that, as Vicki said, you know, it's got numbers on the side, so you can adjust it so that instead of leveling off the top, it can go right into the middle of the cake and turn this single layer into 2 layers. And so that's kind of a cool thing to do too.
Yeah, that is good.
Yeah. When I have a chocolate cake, I don't necessarily always do this with a yellow cake, but with a chocolate cake, especially if you're using white frosting, you can pick up crumbs and end up with a cake that has chocolate crumbs all over the frosting, which doesn't look that nice. So you can do what's called a crumb coat, and that means just putting a thin coating of frosting over your cake before you put the top coat on, and then I usually pop it in the freezer for a little bit to let that sit. So I usually use a spatula instead of a knife, but I forgot it, so when you don't have the proper tools, you just improvise. So you can see that chocolate crumbs are showing through this layer of frosting. And since this is not going to be our final coat, that's okay. We're going to let these crumbs adhere to this thin crumb coat, and then when we do our final coat, oh, you know what? Doesn't really matter here because this is going to be in the middle, but for demonstration's sake, let's do this on the side. I don't want to put any chocolate crumbs into our...
Do you want to just use this bowl of frosting?
Oh, that's
I could add-
right.
I could add a little more to it.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
Okay. And you can get as many crumbs as you...
Okay. Put a real...
Looks good.
Yeah. Okay.
More frosting.
Yeah.
Do you want me to plop some on top?
Yeah. Thank you. Do you want to put this in the freezer for a little bit or just...
I think we'll just try to...
Yeah. Normally do it without any crumb coat, so
Yeah.
it's just that I don't have the tools I normally... What do you usually use? Just a spatula?
I have two smaller offset spatulas,
Mhm.
and I really prefer the smaller one. I have a big one too, but I kind of prefer the smaller ones. I feel like I have more control over
Yeah.
it. And I do have some of those flat edge tools.
Yeah.
And some of them have like little zigzags
Yeah.
so that you can make designs
Right.
and just spin it, you know, and do it that way.
Especially for big cakes, I have this thing, it's called a speed bag, and it's like a great big tip that's kind of flat. And
Oh, and you just go around?
Yeah, you go on
Oh,
this thing.
and then you can just flatten it
Yeah.
out. I have a big tip. Maybe that's what it's for. You want to try to spread it around without getting the crumbs.
I already committed.
That's okay. So there's the crumb coat.
Yeah. Yeah, so here's a crumb coat. It's a thin coat of icing, and it's caught a bunch of the chocolate crumbs from the cake on it. And then you can put a final coat of icing on it that's going to be hopefully free of chocolate crumbs. And like I said, normally I've got frosting all over me, which isn't unusual for me. So let's put our top coat on.
Let you smooth it out, but at least apply some of the heavier frosting. Now people know why there's so many calories in cake now, when you see how thick the frosting has to be. Okay, well, probably more than we need, but. Okay, it's all yours now.
All right. We don't have to be too exact about the very bottom of the cake because we're going to be putting a border on that's going to hide anything, hide the part where the bottom of the cake meets the cake board.
Well, within an hour.
Oh, okay.
But that's okay. I mean, as long as, do you have anything you have to do, Paul? Do you have to be anywhere?
I know.
That'll be fine.
Okay. All right. Wait a minute. Oh, I know what. That's a Viva towel. Here's a fascinating tip that it's serendipitous that we can even do it here. I was taking a class at Michael's. I had this fantastic teacher, and she told me that she had learned from a teacher that there's a paper towel that you can use to smooth cakes with, and it's only Viva paper towels.
Is that what we have?
And this is what these are. I can tell by the texture. And you lay the Viva paper towel on your cake. Look at that.
Wow.
So, we didn't have a spatula and we didn't have a straight edge, but the studio just happened to have,
I brought them from the senior center.
the senior center happened to have Viva paper towels. And look at that. So, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you want a smooth finish on your cake and you don't have a straight edge and you don't have a spatula, grab a Viva paper towel. They have new Viva paper towels now that have like a texture to them. They won't work. It has to be the original Viva paper towels that feel like cloth. Ta-da!
Yay!
Yay!
That looks great.
I just remembered that. So, saved.
Saved by the Viva.
Yeah, saved by Viva. Not Bounty, Viva.
All right, so now I'm going to make the base that we're going to put our wreath on for the flowers. So you want to just have a frosting circle on here so that you can have the flowers angled so they're not just laying flat. So I just go around, and this is also a little turntable that I have that's actually a Wilton turntable, but it makes it easier so that you're just spinning the table trying to get the best, most even turn without having to go around it. All right, so we'll take our flowers out of the freezer. And all we're going to do is just take our flowers. They've been in the freezer, so they're easy to handle. Just peel it off and have it angled like that, so that it's not flat, but it's on that little mound of frosting. And just randomly, here, we can both put these on. And we just randomly put them on to make the wreath. No special order, just what we think looks best as we're going. And naturally, when you do this, you're doing it for anyone probably other than your family. You should wear gloves since you're touching it, and it's going to go right on. Just be sure your hands are really clean, too. Oh, look it, I've got purple on my hands. There. I'll fix that afterwards. So maybe a couple more. I'm not quite sure where to put the little buds, the little rosebuds. Oh, I know, like right here. I don't know what I would do without this turntable. It just makes it so easy to be able to get a full view of what you're doing. And it's amazing how it changes once you put the leaves on, too. Perfect. All right, so that's quite a few flowers. Actually, maybe one more little bud, rosebud, could go here. So there's the wreath. And then the next thing I do is, there's all little spaces in here that I like to fill in. And so what I like to do is make it look like there are little buds that are there. So I just take the Wilton, it's a, I can't see the number, a 6. So it's just a round opening, and just squeeze in between to fill in, to make a little round dot, and I'll show you what happens with that afterwards. So I just like randomly go in between. It's always good to put like an uneven number as opposed to having things in pairs or doubled up. But it's not an absolute. So I don't know if you can see that. Oops. So it's just a little blob of frosting that looks like a circle, because it's going to be a bud. Sure that bud's going to have leaves on it. Actually, can I just do it? Like that? Is that what you do, Deb?
Mm-hmm.
Looks good. Okay, so that's the first step. And then to make it look like a bud, I just take a smaller round tip. So that was a number 6. So I will take like a number 3. It says 3. And you just stick the tip inside that little bud so that you're filling it with the white frosting and making it look like there's a little bud of a flower there. Like that. The only challenge is just making sure you fill them all in. Sometimes I've even used, if I'm using a lot of the same color, like pink roses or pink flowers or yellow, I'll just, instead of using white frosting in the bud, I'll just put a color in that matches the flowers. Get them all? No, no. Kind of like adding baby's breath to an arrangement. And then I just take the same green frosting and use a leaf tip. Is it a 352? Do you know the numbers?
Yeah, I do.
Is that a 350? This one doesn't have a number on it.
That doesn't. Oh, this looks like a 352. 352.
Okay, so that's a little different shade.
Yeah.
All right, I'll use the 352. So if you use a 352, there are two different kind of leaf tips. One has a little mark so that it makes a little vein in the center of the leaf, and the other just is more straight. So I'll use the 352, it's more common. So if you just go into the store and just buying a few tips that you want to experiment with, they always have a 352. And then I'm just going to go around and just add some leaves. And when you use the tip, it's kind of like I said, if you look at it like it's a bird's beak, then the top of it is going straight forward and the openings are on the side. So, should I come around there to do it, or?
And I love the leaf tip because I find when I make flowers, sometimes if they don't come out quite right, the leaf tip can hide a multitude of sins with your flowers.
Yes.
And if there's a little imperfection, that's where you can put your leaf and it'll look perfect.
And here's an example. This is very purple, and there's yellow flower next to it, and the purple kind of got on the yellow. So if we just stick it in there and put a little leaf, no one will ever notice. And if you think about roses, they do have a lot of leaves that go around the bottom of the plant. It's another little hiding place there. How are we doing?
Good.
I think that might be it. Maybe another leaf here or there. So we're almost done. Debbie's just going to show you how to do the border on the bottom. So there's the wreath cake. Looks like a spring flower for Mother's Day, I guess. So I don't know. What color do you want to do on the bottom?
I don't know. I'm thinking maybe pink or
Okay.
yellow.
Okay. Want me to put this on bagged up here?
Yeah.
There's actually probably equal amounts of both, maybe a little more pink. You want to do pink?
Yeah.
All right.
Some more pink here. And we'll just finish this off with a border around the bottom. Add some more pink. Okay, and this is a Wilton 21 tip, and this is what the border tips look like. They're serrated, and this is a smaller border tip, and
Like a star.
a star, yeah,
Yeah.
star tip. So I'll show you a real simple border, and then I'll go over it and we'll do like a little bit more fancier border on this. You can make a border that's just, it's like a shell border. You squirt out and then overlap it like that, and just go around like that. But I think, I don't know. I think I'll show you a slightly more interesting border. This one's like curlicues. So you start out the same way, but then you go up
Ooh.
and around. Up and around.
Very pretty.
Yeah,
I've never done that border.
yeah, it's easy. But it's a little more interesting. And it just finishes off the cake
Very nice.
in a pretty way.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the cake decorating
Yeah.
demonstration. Thank you,
Thank
Deborah.
you, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we have classes at the senior center, we have people do cupcakes and they can do their own flowers. So we thought this would be a nice way for people to be able to follow along at home. So thanks for tuning in.
Yes, thank you.